India, a land of vibrant cultures and rich history, found itself at a crossroads in the 18th century. This was a time of great change and upheaval, where the old ways were being challenged and new powers were emerging. The once mighty Mughal Empire, which had ruled for centuries, began to crumble. Its grand palaces and fortresses, symbols of its former glory, started to show signs of decay. Internal conflicts and ambitious regional powers chipped away at its foundations. The empire, once a unified force, was now a patchwork of competing interests and warring factions. It was into this power vacuum that the British East India Company stepped, initially as traders seeking spices and riches. They came with the promise of trade and prosperity, but their ambitions soon grew beyond mere commerce. The company, with its shrewd tactics and superior military power, gradually expanded its influence. They were not just traders, they were strategists and soldiers ready to use force to achieve their goals. From trading posts, they established political dominance, exploiting the fragmented political landscape. They signed treaties, made alliances, and when necessary, waged wars to consolidate their power. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 marked a turning point. This was not just a battle, it was a decisive moment that would shape the future of the subcontinent. This decisive victory over the Nawab of Bengal cemented the company's grip on the region and its coffers, paving the way for wider control. The wealth of Bengal flowed into the company's hands, funding further expansion. However, the company's rule was far from benevolent. Their primary goal was profit, and they pursued it with ruthless efficiency. It exploited India's resources and people for profit. The riches of the land were extracted and sent back to Britain, leaving the local population to bear the brunt of their policies. Local industries were crippled, traditional systems disrupted, and farmers forced to grow cash crops like indigo, leading to widespread hardship. The economic policies of the company led to famine and suffering for many. The seeds of resentment were sown, waiting for the right moment to sprout. The people of India, though oppressed, began to stir with the desire for change. The year 1857 marked a turning point, a year etched in history as the first major uprising against British rule. This was not just a mutiny, it was a symbol of the growing discontent and desire for freedom. What began as a sepoy mutiny in Meerut would soon engulf large parts of north and central India. The flames of rebellion spread, fueled by the anger and frustration of a people long oppressed. This was the beginning of India's long and arduous journey toward freedom. The struggle would continue for many years, but the spirit of resistance had been ignited, and it would not be easily extinguished. The sepoys, Indian soldiers serving in the company's army, were seething with discontent. Their grievances had been building up over time, fueled by a series of injustices and discriminatory practices imposed by their British officers. The introduction of the Enfield rifle, with its greased cartridges rumoured to be coated with animal fat, proved to be the final straw. This new weapon was seen not just as a tool of war, but as a symbol of disrespect and insensitivity towards the deeply held religious beliefs of the soldiers. The cartridges, which required biting to open, were seen as a direct affront to the religious beliefs of both Hindu and Muslim sepoys. For Hindus, the use of cow fat was sacrilegious, while for Muslims, pig fat was equally offensive. This act was perceived as a deliberate attempt to defile their faiths. In May 1857, the simmering anger erupted into open rebellion in Meerut. The sepoys, driven to the edge by their grievances, decided to take a stand against their oppressors. Sepoys refused to use the controversial cartridges, sparking a mutiny that quickly spread. Their defiance was a bold statement against the British authority, and it resonated with many others who had suffered under colonial rule. The rebels, joined by disgruntled local rulers and commoners, marched towards Delhi, proclaiming the aged Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader. This move was symbolic, aiming to unite various factions under a common cause. The revolt, though ultimately crushed by the British, was a watershed moment. It marked the beginning of a new era of resistance and highlighted the growing discontent among the Indian populace. It exposed the vulnerabilities of the company's rule and ignited the flames of resistance. The British, though victorious, were forced to recognize the deep-seated anger and the potential for future uprisings. While not a unified national movement, it laid bare the shared sense of grievance and the yearning for freedom that resonated across the subcontinent. Different communities, despite their varied backgrounds, found common ground in their struggle against colonial oppression. The brutal reprisals by the British, marked by widespread killings and atrocities, further fueled the flames of resentment. The harsh measures taken to suppress the revolt left a lasting scar on the collective memory of the Indian people. The events of 1857 served as a stark reminder of the human cost of oppression and the indomitable spirit of those who resist. The legacy of the revolt continued to inspire future generations in their quest for independence and justice. The 1857 revolt had profound consequences. The British Crown, realizing the instability of company rule, dissolved the East India Company and assumed direct control of India in 1858. This marked the beginning of the British Raj, a period of significant political, social and economic changes. While the British administration implemented some reforms, including the development of infrastructure and education, its primary focus remained on strengthening its grip on power and maximizing revenue extraction. This period also witnessed the rise of a new generation of educated Indians exposed to Western ideas of liberty, democracy and nationalism. Inspired by these ideals and witnessing the injustices of colonial rule firsthand, a burgeoning nationalist consciousness began to emerge. Intellectuals, journalists and social reformers played a crucial role in shaping this nascent nationalism, using the power of the pen and the platform of newly established newspapers and journals to advocate for self-rule. Organizations like the Indian National Congress were formed, providing platforms for educated Indians to voice their demands for greater political representation and social reforms. The stage was set for a new era of organized resistance against British rule. Section 4. Voices for Change. Reform movements take root. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of numerous social and religious reform movements across India. These movements emerged as a response to the various social injustices and inequalities that plagued Indian society at the time. These movements, while not directly challenging British rule, aimed to eradicate social evils, promote education, and empower marginalized communities, thereby laying the groundwork for a more just and equitable society. Reformers believed that by addressing these deep-rooted issues, they could create a foundation for a stronger and more unified nation. Leaders like Rajaram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and Jyotirao Phule championed causes such as the abolition of sati, widow remarriage, and education for girls. Their tireless efforts brought significant changes in societal attitudes and practices, paving the way for future generations to continue the fight for equality and justice. They challenged entrenched patriarchal norms and advocated for the rights of women, recognizing that a truly free India required the emancipation of all its citizens. These leaders understood that the progress of a nation depended on the upliftment of its women, and they worked tirelessly to ensure that women had access to education and opportunities for personal growth. Religious reform movements like the Brahmo Samaj and the Arya Samaj sought to purify Hinduism from what they perceived as superstitious practices and emphasized the importance of rationality and social justice. These movements aimed to create a more inclusive and progressive society by promoting values of equality and human dignity. These movements, while diverse in their approaches, shared a common thread, a belief in the power of education and social reform to uplift Indian society. Education was seen as a crucial tool for empowering individuals and communities, enabling them to break free from the shackles of ignorance and oppression. These reform movements played a crucial role in awakening the masses and instilling a sense of pride and unity among Indians. By addressing social injustices and promoting a sense of collective identity, these movements helped to foster a spirit of solidarity and resilience among the people. They also laid the groundwork for a more organized and assertive nationalist movement that would challenge the very foundations of British rule in the coming decades. The efforts of these reformers not only brought about significant social changes, but also inspired a new generation of leaders who would eventually lead India to independence. Section 5. From Petitions to Protests, the Rise of Assertive Nationalism. As the 20th century dawned, the Indian nationalist movement gained momentum. The partition of Bengal in 1905, a blatant attempt by the British to divide and rule, proved to be a turning point. It sparked outrage and resistance across India, marking the rise of a more assertive and radical phase of the independence movement. The Swadeshi movement, advocating for the boycott of British goods and the promotion of indigenous industries, gained widespread support. Leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bipin Chandra Pal, known as the Lal Bal Pal Trio, emerged as powerful voices of this new nationalism. The movement witnessed a surge in revolutionary activities, with young nationalists forming secret societies and engaging in acts of defiance against British rule. The message was clear. India was no longer content with mere petitions and appeals. It demanded self-rule. The division within the Congress between the moderates, who favoured dialogue and gradual reform, and the extremists, who advocated for more assertive action, highlighted the growing impatience for independence. The stage was set for a leader who could unite these diverse strands of nationalism and lead India to its destiny.